Welcome, Cassandra. Dick, you are the author of Songs from the Mountaintop, a collection of poetry that includes individuality, liberty, heroism, and you're going to read us a short little poem that I'm going to let everyone be surprised by in just a moment. But what I wanted to have you on the show for today is to talk about what's the deal with heroes? Why do we need them? What's the big deal? Do we really need to have heroes in our life? Is it important? What are important heroes? What are the characteristics of heroes? So we're going to talk all about heroes, heroism, real life heroes, fiction heroes, and all those kinds of things. I think a lot of times we hear things like Elon Musk as a hero, but then we see him do something horrible or stupid, right? Some people I think idolize, presidential characters, and I'm not a big fan of doing that personally for various reasons. I'm not a big fan of idolizing and making a hero of any president while he's living. That's a rule of thumb I have. It's a Kirk rule of thumb, is that if they're
It's
alive,
reasonable.
they shouldn't be idolized. When they're dead, if you want to say, you know what, he had some, that Reagan guy had some good stuff. Now that he's gone and he no longer has power or the ability to have power over it. So, I want to talk a little bit about that. But before we get going with this whole discussion of heroes, I wanted to give everyone a taste of your poetry. And this could be found Amazon, Barnes and Noble, pretty much even random bookstores. You'll find this Songs from the Mountaintop by Kassandra Dick. That's Kassandra. So why don't you go ahead and, after that introduction, give yourself a quick little poem for everybody, or give us a poem.
Absolutely. Yeah, this is one of my favorites. It's called Meditation on Death. I live like I am being watched because I am. I am watching this life unfold. It is mine, yet not mine alone. It is divine, for it is my sole opportunity to breathe soul into body, possibility into being. Before you die, you do watch your life go by. It's only a flash if you never look with your own eyes.
Nice. Do you like Emily Dickinson?
I know a few of her poems. I don't
Okay.
read a lot, but do you get Emily Dickinson vibes?
Well, I just yes and no. I mean, I'm not an expert on her. I just know is she the one who wrote Death Be Not Proud and Hope is I know she wrote Hope
Oh,
is the Thing with Feathers. So she wrote a whole
yes.
bunch of poems,
She,
and she was very interesting contemplation of the way she wrote was very unique. And I'd have to read your poem a little bit more to get a sense of it, but I like the watcher type idea, and you turned it around into watching yourself as the
yes.
as kind of the concept, the conceit of the poem, which is nice. So that's good. And that was one of your shorter ones. You have a whole bunch of kind of poems. What can people expect from the book before we hop into heroes?
I'm glad you asked because it isn't so much about heroism, but it is
Yeah,
about liberty of the human spirit.
there we
So
go.
honestly, that is heroism if we're being, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But yeah, you can expect a lot of just sheer joy and sheer freedom put on paper. It's not very emotional, but it is very rich.
Okay.
And yeah, I say these poems are sharp because they do have something to say. And I think it's important for people to know that before they pick up the book. So if you
Okay.
want a poem with an idea, get this one.
All right. Songs of of liberty of the human spirit into heroes. The first question before we actually get into the why do we need heroes? A broader question is that Cassandra and I were debating ahead of time was, should we have more or less real life heroes like a Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk, or for some people Barack Obama, or should we have more fiction and literary heroes, and cinematic heroes? Which one is more valuable? Why? What's the value of either of them? So now I'll just start by saying that I believe we should basically only have literary fiction heroes, that you can admire things about people, and you should, about real life heroes. But, and I believe Ayn Rand said something like this at one point in her life, where she said, Howard Rourke is Howard Rourke forever. You shouldn't even, she said, don't even idolize and make her a hero, Ayn Rand, as the hero of your life. because she could make a mistake. She could, do something wrong, something bad. And then that kind of shatters the visage, the image of her versus Howard Rourke is Howard Rourke. John Galt is John Galt. These characters are these characters forever. And they don't change in the sense of what's there is there. Kira Argunagov is Kira forever. So what are your thoughts, Cassie? I'm going to start calling you Cassie now. What are
Yeah.
your thoughts? What do you think?
I think we need real life heroes because they're the ones who are actually progressing our species. They're the ones that we have to look up to for new technologies, new ideas. And it's kind of funny that Ayn Rand said we shouldn't idolize real people when she's become a hero. Like, even if she told us not to call her a hero, I can't help but see her that way because of the philosophy that she created, the, self-contained philosophy that even applies to our life, 50, 60 years after she began it. So it's very hard for me to not think of her as a hero because of what she accomplished and how far she brought ideas about what morality is, how to live a good life. It's impossible, really. And yeah, to see the flaws of heroes is important because we're not, I think I used the word idolize, but that's not quite it. It's we're looking up to them for the things that make them heroes, and we're recognizing the things that make them flawed because we're not idolizing the flaws. That's not ever what it's about. We're idolizing those progressive and progressive in the like literal term, not like progressive ideas. But you know what I'm saying is you're you're recognizing their attributes that are worthy of being emulated, and then you're acknowledging the flaws so that you can avoid them.
Well, but I would say that's the role of literature and art
For
is
sure.
to recognize those things because if you don't, you have to take the anti-Semitic remarks of Elon Musk along with him accomplishing what he accomplished the other day with catching a rocket, a 19-story rocket, like and being the
A
leader of the
skyscraper.
person, yeah, that catches a skyscraper with some pins or whatever. Like, it's insanity, and in a good way, insanity, like amazingly heroic and an accomplishment of the era. And yeah, so I don't. I have to go and look at where the quote, or it was because it was an informal. It wasn't published. I think it was something between Ayn Rand and Leonard Peikoff, her heir. And I think the point she was trying to make was that the value of literature and art and what it does is it focuses your mind to look at these are the characteristics. Because when you look at a hero, a real life hero, who again, we should have people that we admire, we should have people that we look up to, and that's like, I want to be like an Elon Musk. I want to be like this person. I think there's a lot of value to that. I'm not, and the same thing with Ayn Rand. Like, I want to be an Ayn Randian writer and thinker and creator. I think there's a lot of value to that. But the problem is, you dig into their life and you say, okay, they had like these sex faux pas, they had this thing happening. That's like they were doing drugs when they probably shouldn't be. They did something, like they embezzled for a few, like O. Henry. I love O. Henry, and he like embezzled. Like, how do you take that into his whole heroic life of the kinds of great stories he wrote? Well, it's not a good thing. It's definitely, you can't really defend it. Thomas Jefferson. I love Thomas Jefferson. He did have slaves, period. And you cannot defend him as a slave owner. And there's a guy, a professor at Clemson I've had on the show, Bradley Thompson. You could look him up as C. Bradley Thompson, and he's
Oh
an
yeah.
expert on like John Adams and things like that. And he has this analogy that if Thomas Jefferson were to be chasing down an escaped slave from his one of his escaped slaves, and they were caught in a forest together alone, and the slave killed Thomas Jefferson before before he wrote the Declaration or after, it doesn't matter. The slave would have been justified morally, right? And so when you think about like, and I really like that analogy, that kind of metaphor or whatever, because you have to agree, I think, with that sentiment if you're a good person, no matter how great, heroic, amazing Thomas Jefferson was, that's a not just a flaw, that's a for he didn't even free his slaves when he died, right? Like, that's a problem. And so there's there's a lot of value in admiring Thomas Jefferson, and we need to call him a great hero in a certain sense, but we have to recognize the limitations of calling real life people heroes. The value of literature is that if I were to create a literary image, a statue, like, like the David here, right? David was probably flawed. Maybe he cheated on his wife, or who knows? He did things he shouldn't have done, right? Or that he did. But what we're doing with art, and why I love art so much, is we're saying, like, yes, that these things happen in real life, which is why we need art. That's the whole reason, because you need to have the vision to help guide you in the muck of life, because life can get complicated. Sometimes it gets a little dirty, and that's okay. You need the North Star to kind of walk toward the right direction. So that's my argument. And I think we're on the same page with a lot of stuff. Like, I don't think we should not admire Elon Musk. I'm not saying that.
But even if you don't want to take the ridiculous things that he says on X, take any one of the engineers, learn the names of the engineers that actually were working on the project. They're each heroes for their part to play in that. And like, one thing that I think that we miss by only looking for heroes in fiction is that if I want to be a hero, which I do. I think that it's very important for each person to be, first and foremost, their own hero. You have to live with yourself through this life. I need people to look up to who I can actually emulate and acknowledge that, okay, so I have flaws. My name's Cassie and I have flaws, but I'm also, extraordinary in certain aspects. And I would hate to die and find out that my legacy was, the terrible things I did in my 20s, or I'm not that bad of a person, but I'm just trying to
How
make
terrible
this
of things did you do in your 20s?
listen. The things I've
Jeez.
done for my no.
Oh,
Anyway,
man.
but
Just
the
up in
point,
Canada doing atrocities over there. All right.
just casually, like only on
Yeah.
Saturdays.
Yeah.
The
All
point
right.
is, if we can't find the real life heroes, how can we be them?
Well, okay. Yeah. So, I mean, you're the thing you're talking about with heroes, it seems like there's a question of, like, when we talk about Elon Musk versus the engineer, there's a big difference in the sense of the bigness, right?
For
Of them.
sure.
The engineer is never going to get acknowledged, in a sense, just like the
Nor does he
soldier.
necessarily want to. Yeah.
Well, some of them I bet do. I'm
Oh,
sure there are some who do. But yes, you're right. Some don't. I think there are some entrepreneurs, or no, I know there are a lot of entrepreneurs, a lot of business heroes who don't want the public spotlight. They just want to do their work. I don't think Hank Reardon and Atlas Shrugged really wanted super fame or anything. He just wanted to do his work. And I think Jeff Bezos is more like that. Like, he's a great hero. He does publicity and things like that. I don't think he does it for the same reason that Elon Musk does it.
no,
Like,
no chance.
I think Elon Musk is a great hero in many ways, but he's also a political animal. He's pretty good at being a political animal and kind of playing with sides to kind of try to get what he wants, tax credits for Tesla type stuff, which I
Yeah.
don't agree with. And I think is not heroic,
No.
despite his accomplishments in creating a interesting new car and a new car company. So, okay. So, I think if what you're saying is you want to have, you want to think of yourself as a hero, which we all are heroes. We're the hero of our own story in the sense of the protagonist, the main character. But, I think there's a bigger question of, you can have a hero that's like an engineer if you want to be an engineer. And I think that's a good, model, or a good, some kind of model for guiding you in specifics of, like, how to have a career like that, how to move in that direction. I remember I was in film school. Everyone could only think of the great directors of all time, and that's the only people they want to be. Like,
Mm.
I want to be the next Steven Spielberg. It's like, that's not going to happen for you, probably, to be honest. And it's possible, excuse me, but it's probably not going to happen for you. And I think it's the wrong way to think about it. Like, I think thinking of being a writer and saying I'm going to be the next Ayn Rand is the wrong way to think about it.
Oh yeah,
Um,
no, I'm gonna be the next Cassandra Dick.
yeah, exactly. But also, just, I think sometimes when people think that, they're thinking also the size, like the
Sure, because
popularity.
yeah,
Excuse me.
Yeah, because is it the popularity that actually makes the hero, or is it the accomplishments? Because Elon Musk has been part of amazing teams that have put forward new technologies, and yeah, he's the poster child, but how much of his mind is actually in each organization? It's hard to tell.
Oh, I'm sure those organizations are heavy Musk.
Hey,
They have a
Musk.
they have a musky vibe and smell to them, I'm sure. I'm pretty confident the someone like that in particular has a heavy influence. I mean, one of the tests of a great leader in business, Jim Collins wrote some books like Good to Great, Great by Choice. He's a business analyst. And I think one of the interesting tests is when they leave the company, how good is that company afterwards?
Ooh,
Because
yes.
like if a lot of companies like they have this powerful leader and then they just kind of falter after the death of that leader, which is one of the things Steve Jobs really worked hard for at the end of his life. That's why he designed Apple University. He wanted people to be thinking on their own. Now, I would, argue that even though it's financially it's gone up, spiritually it's dead since him. Like there hasn't been the kind of innovation that he incorporated. There hasn't been that kind of massive new innovation. So I think a lot of Apple has kind of died in a sense with him, even though
Yeah.
it's a bigger, it's $1 trillion company now.
And that kind of brings us back to the idea of legacy, because you were saying when you were talking about presidents and idolizing them after their death, that's fine because they can't do anything else wrong.
It's
I
that
guess
too.
that's
Yeah.
it's like you're stuck in history as you were once you've passed. And I think the heroes that we have today will actually be more encapsulated because we just have so much more data on their lives and their world. So it's so
Mm.
much easier to pick out what made them a hero these days because, the history, it's kind of hard to see the good with all the bad, and some of it's just rumor and some of it's like you just can't look past it. Like, of course, slave owning, you can't look past that. But if we were to look past that and see the Declaration of Independence, I mean, you're left with an entire nation built on, again, the human spirit and the liberties that we enjoy.
Well, so that's interesting. I and that you're saying we have a better ability to track heroism in a sense because we have so much data on people, right? The problem is, and this is why I think having literary heroes, a lot of them and strong ones, is we choose to cancel. We choose to go the other way. So we choose to find something in someone's past, some small flaw, and we blow that out of proportion. Oh, he said this sexist remark when he was 22, right? And so he's an evil person. And we have to try to destroy his legacy. Like they tried this with Kevin Hart, right? He said some offensive jokes on Twitter 10 years ago that when he was a struggling artist trying to, succeed or whatever. And now he's not going to be able to go to the Oscars. Or we're going to try to cancel this person or this celebrity, this business person. Oh, he's bad because he said this. So I think like it's true that we have the analytics, the data, the information because more is recorded and that's going to be the case going forward. But it's also true that the reason we need the vision of this is what you need to look at is because we tend to choose to look at the negative stuff today, which is partly, I think, because we have such a strong literature and art and music and things of that nature that is focused on everyone's got horrible flaws in them. Everyone's morally gray at best. They have negative, they have blackness in them no matter what.
Mm.
So we're all moral sinners right from birth. We have this Christian, everyone's a sinner. Like, oh, he thinks he's better than us. No, he's not. Elon Musk no better than me. He's a bad person. Look at what he said. This. He's anti-Semitic. He did that. He did this. And so, what you need heroes for is to give you that vision of what a hero could look like so that you can isolate in Elon Musk when he is a hero. Because he is a hero, but not all the time. He does stupid things. He does things that I think are ridiculous.
Yeah,
So
I can definitely agree with
that
that.
that's my view, I think. But I agree that we need to have people in our like that we admire, that we, want to move toward like being an engineer, a writer, and we say, I want to be like this. I'm going to study these writers and try to be more like that.
Oh, exactly. And if you use their vocation as your basis for why they're a hero, it makes it easier to emulate them because that's what you're aiming for too. So, for me, like people might laugh out loud, but my original hero when I was learning to write was Stephen King because he was so prolific and
Why
like
would
the
they
books that I
laugh?
was, well, because a lot of people think that he just pulls things out of a hat, you know, but he's just
Oh,
nailed it so many times that, yeah, I was very impressed
yeah.
with him when I was young. So, yeah.
I don't know why anybody who would laugh at you at that is ridiculous, I think. So he wrote a great book like on
Why we need
writing.
more heroes. Yeah.
Yeah, like he
Yeah,
wrote a great
I
book
have
on
it.
writing. I like that book for sure.
One of my favorites in university,
Yeah,
actually, one of
like
the only university books I kept.
yeah, I mean, like I definitely am not a massive fan of his writing personally, but
But have you read The Girl Who Loved Tom Gordon?
I haven't read that much anymore. I've
Read
read
that
stuff
one.
like 20 years ago. My point is simply, I'm sure there's a lot of I'm sure there's my point is like you can isolate and look at accomplishments. So he figured out how to, create a series of worlds, stories, get into a rhythm of actual productivity. So he's one of the most
Mhm.
productive, successful writers of all time. And I remember there's a interview between George R. Martin, who I think is a vastly better writer than Stephen King,
I
in
mean, I've
terms of
only
quality of story, character, arc development.
character definitely, yeah.
Yeah. But anyway, I don't want to get in an argument about
No, no,
particular.
sorry, sorry.
I'm just saying like
I'm a
he
word
like,
nerd, sorry.
yeah, no, me too. I have a literature podcast, but I'm saying like the thing, like the interview, it was George R. R. Martin and Stephen King, and he said, Martin said, how the F do you write so many books, right? And it's because George writes like one every 10 years type thing, famously. And anyway, the point is that there's that kind of, and even he kind of has an admiration of like, you write a book every 2, 3 months, it feels like. And that's productive, and he's good at that. And they're still, they
Definitely.
deliver and people love them, and that's great.
Yeah,
So
yeah, he's got the formula.
he's doing so. And I'm all for those, like, yeah, there's this aspect of this hero I like, right? Like, he's productive. I think he says stupid things on Twitter just like Elon Musk does. So,
It's true.
Twitter like this is the data thing. Like, it reveals stupid things people do sometimes.
Mhm. You could
Things I think are stupid,
I
but
was gonna say
maybe
I'm pretty sure I've made some stupid comments on there too, so don't
I've
watch
made
it.
no stupid comments. All my comments are
Perfect.
brilliant. Okay, so why do we need heroes? Let's dig into this a little bit. So you and I chose some poems, some snippets of poems, and I was thinking maybe you could start with why you chose some of these for why do we need heroes. We're not going to read the whole poem, but these are poems. If you haven't read them, audience, go read them. They're good poems. These are just like little snippets. But Cassie, why'd you choose one of them and let us know what you think and why you chose it for this?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. The reason I chose multiple of these poems is because when I think of heroes, I often think of heroes in battle. That's kind of my only reference point. But most of the poems that I chose actually talk about being a hero in life. So
Mm.
conquering life. You're not conquering, well, sometimes the enemy is death. So you're conquering yourself and you're conquering life and you're making it the best that you can. So, for example, I'm going to start with the Psalm of Life if that's all right with
Yeah,
you.
no, that's my favorite. So good
I
choice.
know, I thought so.
Yeah.
I'm not going to read the whole thing because
We could read this, right? This little
this is
snippet.
okay. Oh,
Yeah.
perfect.
Yeah, I think what's here, like
Perfect.
it's, I think like 12 stanzas or something. This is just two or three. I think that's, yeah, give people
Perfect.
a little morsel.
You've got it.
Yeah.
Life is real. Life is earnest. And the grave is not the goal. Dust thou art, to dust returnest, was not spoken of the soul. Not enjoyment and not sorrow is our destined end or way, but to act that each tomorrow find us farther than today. Lives of great men all remind us we can make our lives sublime, and departing leave behind us footprints on the sands of time. It
So, well, go ahead.
it just reminds me, like that last part that I've bolded there, it just reminds me why it's so important to have heroes in your life because you're thinking of yourself, you're thinking of your own passage through time. What makes you great? Well, look at the things that you can aim for and look at the things that you can avoid, just as we were saying.
Yeah, so and I also like And isn't there, and I'm trying to remember, and I need to get the rest of the poem out. I should have had it.
Oh, I
But
have it here. Yeah.
isn't there something about like you become the hero as well? Isn't there like after there's an image of like you emulate the hero and then you can become the hero for other people, right?
Certainly.
But I guess
Yes,
that's we can make our lives sublime ourselves, is what he's saying. Which is why I
exactly.
like this poem, is it's not just about other people, it's also about the value is you're even if you follow in footsteps of other people, you make them deeper, and that can help the person behind you.
And the other thing that's so important about it is that the goal is not to suffer. It's not about sacrifice. The goal is life. Life is real. Life is earnest. And we may be of dust. I think he says that here. Dust thou art, to dust returnest, but that's not of your soul. And to me, I think of the soul as your consciousness, and you can further that to your legacy, what's left behind.
Doesn't he say, like, isn't it like, I'm trying to pull it up real quick. So it says at the beginning of it, what the heart of the young man said to the psalmist, which I always loved. So he's like saying this to a religious person. So it's what the heart of a young man. So a young person sitting, I always picture a young person sitting in a pew, like in a church, and there's this psalmist at the head of the church talking about, oh, dust, you're dust, and we're all dust, and we're all gonna die, and talking all about death, and this is the end, and try to make the best of life as you get it, but you're gonna die,
Well,
and it's all about
and
death. And
and there's sarcasm in the first stanza. I honestly should have just added the first stanza. Do you mind if I take that one?
yeah,
It's
just read
just
that.
it's
Go for it.
it's just so good. He says, "Tell me not in mournful numbers, life is but an empty dream, for the soul is dead that slumbers, and things are not what they seem." He's saying, "Don't give me that crap about heaven elsewhere. I'm living it. Life is real, life is earnest, and the grave is not the goal." Like, I should have
Yeah.
added it because it's just so
Well, people just need to
beautiful.
read the whole poem,
Oh yeah,
which
yeah.
we're not going to do here, but it's a great poem. I agree. So in this, the reason you chose this, it sounds like, why do we need heroes, is because this is a poem that gives you a nice rhythm and words to understand that the value of answering that question, in a sense, because it reminds us, as he says, that we can make our lives sublime. That's
Exactly.
why we need heroes, is because they remind us, oh yeah, we could do great things. We could do something. When you learn something about Ayn Rand, like Brandon Lisi, the archivist at ARI, just wrote a great little anecdote about Ayn Rand in fiction on New Ideal. I don't know if you saw that,
I
but I
haven't
really
seen it
love it.
yet.
It's very short, but it's about why we need literature in our lives. So I love it, obviously, but it's a story about how, I wish I remember I wish I would have reread it, but so when she was young and they were going to Petrograd with her family after everything was taken from them, and they were going there, they were stopped by, I think, some Bolsheviks, some soldiers, and the soldiers were, like, if you were hiding money, you could get shot. And the father did hide some money because that's all they had in the world or something. And they came around, and Ayn Rand, reflecting later, says that she was meditating on literature, and it was able to help her, like, if I'm going to die now, at least I got to experience and see Hugo's world. And it kept her, gave her courage in that moment, and it kind of solidified her love of literature. But I just think, like, it's, it has that resonating power of what literature can do for you, and making you into a better person. And that's one, Hugo was her hero, and that gave her strength in that moment. And I think it was
Oh
a
yeah.
particular character that she fell in love with in Les Miserables, I believe.
Mm.
Anyway, so what about these other poems you chose? So you chose all three of these, I believe.
Oh, I think I did. Yes.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So which, like, we don't have to, you could read some if you want, but why did you choose them for this question?
Well, again,
What else do
for
they help us?
yeah, for Song of Heroes, I chose that one because he's telling the people around him, like, come on, ye brave, come on, ye brave. The time is now or never. Like, he's imploring people right now to be the heroes, because we talk about the heroes. This is just a portion of the poem, but he's talking about what a hero looks like and what we can find from the heroes of old, but we need you now, right now. So yeah, that's kind of, there's like a bit of a impetus, or like it's imperative that you be a hero now when we need you.
Okay. Do you want to read a piece?
Certainly. Yeah. I just want to read those last four lines because it's
Sure.
just so good. Come on, ye brave. Come on, ye brave. The time is now or never. If right unto the wrong be slave, the wrong may reign forever.
That's great. Yeah. So it's like be the best version of yourself, put yourself out there, have courage, do good things so that you can now don't wait till later when it's too late and try to do the right thing. Yeah, I like
Certainly.
that. That's good. From Song of Heroes, Samuel. I don't think I've ever read that one. Okay, let's actually move on to the next question. What does it
Yeah,
mean to be a
absolutely.
hero? I think. So what does it mean to be a hero? So this is characteristics of heroes. I think this is an interesting question. It's a really long question
We could have
because
a whole show about it.
yeah, well, I think you could have a whole podcast about it because part of what for me as a person interested in the arts, like you can easily go too abstract. In order to understand this question, I think you need to have hundreds of heroes in your mind, in a sense. Like you need to have experienced heroes. Now you could do this in a broad sense. So, for instance, you could look at each era, and they have a kind of a slightly different answer to this question. This is what I love about reading literature and great heroes of the past. And I have a thing called the Literary Canon Club, where we read the great classics as a group, from Homer to Melville. And part
Wow.
of the value of that is you get to see, art and literature in general are values ossified. I think of them as like you can really see this is, just like today, we have Elon Musk's and we have all these flawed people who have great heroic things, but they have flaws. The way, like in 2000 years, how people can understand the 2000, from 2000 to 2000 to 2100 or 2500, what is the dominant hero? What's the biggest piece of literature that everyone acclimated to over time? And it'll be, in our era, we could talk about that at some point. In, like, if you look at ancient Greek, you can have a couple of strong heroes. They're demigods. They're that everyone would have known, everyone would have tried to emulate. They talked about them in speeches, they wrote about them, they emulated them, they despised them, or they wrote about how
Mm,
there's something negative. But they were the central, this is what it means to be canonical, right? They were the center piece of everything. So I think of in ancient Greek, like Achilles and Odysseus are the two
hmm.
famous main ones from Homer. And the issue is, so like, what does it mean to be a hero? So they have a view of what it means to be a hero. I think the Greeks had a view, and they sometimes would debate the view, but there was a view that you could look at and say, like, this is Odysseus is a kind of character of, what it meant to be a hero in a certain way, an ancient Greek hero. So anyway, I don't know if you have thoughts on that. Like different eras have different characteristics. We have our characteristics today.
Yeah.
Or
Well, I would
we
almost say
don't.
that we're lacking heroes today is what I is the problem that I was noticing. I think
Sure.
the heroes of Greece and Rome were decisive. They were kind of larger than life in terms of like being almost all powerful or like all knowing. I just think of Odysseus as like he kind of got lucky in a couple of circumstance, but the point is that he was dedicated to the life of his party, like the life of his soldiers, the life of himself. He wanted to get home. He wanted to survive or sorry, am I thinking of the Iliad? I might be thinking of the wrong
Well,
hero. Oh,
Achilles is the
not
one that
Achilles, Odysseus.
but are you thinking about Achilles in the sense of he has the two fates and he's trying to decide if he wants to go back and fight in the Trojan War or if he wants to sit it out because he's been wrong? Is that what you're thinking of? Or
Oh, I was
Odysseus?
thinking of the decisiveness in battle, but
So I Yeah, I mean, I think all of them have a decisiveness in battle. I don't, the question is often like, how do they get it? Why do they do it? What is their motivation, for instance?
hmm.
So I think like the ancient Greek hero, there's some concepts like they're about glory, like self glory particularly. It's about their reification, their deification, like them, not reification, like them being talked about forever. Like it's that's important to them.
Hmm.
And obviously courage, decisiveness, arete, like excellence in what they do. Achilles is the greatest of them because he's the greatest warrior. He has the most arete. But in this world, it's interesting because this is why I think kind of contrasting with, for instance, the Roman ideal. So one of the characters that'll often be chosen, of course, is the Aeneid, which is coming after the fall of the Republic, essentially, of Rome. And the Aeneid is much more about pietas or piety and duty. So he's much more about, and this is perpetrated in the story and in other stories that they would tell that are Roman ideals. And
Mm.
that's kind of what it means to be heroes. You're embodying in a fiction character an ideal. So in this case, it's doing the right thing, quote unquote, for the society. Like his whole mission is, so Aeneas is a Trojan warrior after the fall of Troy, and he's taking his people through the Mediterranean trying to found Rome, to be the founder of Rome. That's the idea. And so he's always, in the back, he's always, the gods are telling him, this is your duty, this is your duty. So the most famous example is he falls in love with the queen Dido of Carthage, and he's says he falls in love with her, he sleeps with her, they're kind of married in a certain sense, but then he gets a reminder that he has to go home to do this duty, and so he can't do things for selfish reasons because he's dutiful, so he leaves her and she leaps into a volcano or something, and then he goes to found Rome. So when you look at Aeneas and you look at Homer, or excuse me, Odysseus and Achilles, you could see that Achilles is much more selfish, right?
Mhm.
Like he doesn't care in a sense. Like in a sense, he almost wants Greeks to die in order to make them miss him, right? Like which a lot of people think of as very petty, but he was wronged,
Yeah,
and he was. Yeah, go ahead.
well, I was gonna say if you are the best and no one acknowledges it, and then they die because they didn't acknowledge it, did they? I mean, can they look to you for as their savior?
Well, that's interesting too, and I think it's so there's an injustice that occurs in the sense of the system that they are living in, that he is the best at, and that he is thinking is the best at, he realizes is kind of arbitrary, which is one reason why he kind of gives up on and says, I'm sitting this one out. He comes back in because his friend Patroclus is killed by Hector, the Trojan hero, and that causes him to, in a fury of vengeance, go back and kill Hector and drag him through the streets and all that stuff.
Hmm.
So it's much more personal. Yeah, go ahead.
There's a retelling of that story. I don't know whether
Yeah.
it's useful, but it's
Madeline
a
Miller.
yeah. Have you read this one?
Yes.
What did you make of it?
I know everybody loves it. I just don't understand. Like, I don't know. I don't have any problem. Like, I've done retellings of short stories of these things and it's fine. I just like, I feel like there's a kind of pandering because it's like the whole idea of it was the erotic homosexual relationship between Patroclus and Achilles, which I just don't think is at all a relevant issue
Mm.
to the story.
Hence, it was like
And
pandering to today's like ideals or
yeah, like it
today's.
was
Oh,
just,
okay.
and the writing was not bad. She's a good writer. I definitely, there's Galatea. She wrote a short story called Galatea, and I
Oh, and
hated that.
Circe. Oh, really?
Oh,
Okay. Well,
oh, I
Circe is
hated it so
good.
much.
That one I can tell you is
I've heard
really
a lot of
good.
people like Circe. And I haven't read that one, so I can't speak to that. I'd like to try. I'm all for these kinds of retellings for the record. I think they should be done more often. I hope to do my own. I thought Song of Achilles was okay. Wasn't for me. I wasn't a huge fan of it. It's not my kind of, I'm not that into homoerotic
No,
literature.
fair enough. I
Um,
liked that his love interest. I couldn't remember his name, so I'm glad you brought it up. But
Patroclus.
Patroclus, I was
Patroclus.
I was glad that he was able to like because in the sense that he doesn't see himself as a hero, but he was able to actually witness Achilles as he was and through all the trials that he had before the war. So it was
Mhm.
kind of interesting to see him grow with Achilles and also like recognize like, oh, these are the actual issues that he's had to face with his own people before he even, stepped out onto the back. Because he was like his dad had high expectations of him and like kind of like used him as it seemed like he used him as a pawn, basically, but maybe I've
Okay.
got that wrong. It's
No,
been a while.
that's in Song of Achilles, but that's not really an
No,
Iliad.
fair enough.
Yeah,
Totally
so
fair
like
enough. Yeah.
it's I don't think that I mean it's a modern interpretation
Yeah.
of the expectations that a king like Achilles, these are all kings. So these are all like that's the thing is these are tribal kings in their area that are going together fighting under another king. And look, again, when you translate heroes, so now we're talking about hero translation. It's an
Yeah.
interesting idea. You're going to bring in the modern interpretations of what is going on, which I think what's going on in our era. Like, what do we value as a hero? And it's interesting. Like, it's more the softer edge of him. It's more making him kind of feminine, and she really
Yeah.
brings up an emphasis of him dressing up as a woman, which is a story that was told in ancient Greek about Achilles because he was being hidden by, I think, his mother. And then it's brought out that he's the hero because they bring out these weapons and he like admires them rather than the jewelry, right? And so there's stuff like that, which that I think Song of Achilles emphasizes that. It emphasizes the trials with Chiron and the centaur. Again, I'm all for that. I think I haven't done that. It's an interesting comparative literature study to look at here are the heroes retelling these heroes and that are popular and how they are different from the classics because it's reflecting our story, our
Yeah.
what we think is important.
We actually have an art piece coming up in the next slide that is a retelling of a classic myth. So I think that would be interesting once we've solved what does it mean to be a hero, of course.
Well, I this is my view of like solving that question. I don't think there ever is a solving of it. I think it's you, Cassie, come up to what it means to be a hero to you, right? And what I think is important about studying literature and what I try to do at Troubadour is, and other people do this, is help you get that from other artists and understand what the artist is trying to say. This is what William Wordsworth says was a hero. This is what Cervantes thinks is a hero, right? He created the first wannabe hero, which we all want to be heroes. And Don Quixote is the first, like if you saw that movie Kick Ass, like it's
Oh
obviously
yeah.
a satirical, but that's kind of like a Don Quixote type character. It's like it's a wannabe. He's read all these stories. He wants to be like that. And so he goes out and tries to, do that, but he's really just chasing windmills and it's whatever. So, there's a lot of that I think happening. So here you have for what it does it mean to be a hero, which one are you saying is the one you're talking about with
For me,
retelling?
a legacy poem, but you've also
Okay.
got the character of a happy
Ulysses.
warrior
Yeah.
as well.
Yeah. So why don't you do well, if you want, I could the legacy the character of a happy warrior, I feel is like so much more complex and I don't know how to talk about this one. It's a long poem. Thank you for this is a great selection. You're very good at selecting these sections. So thank you. Well, I'll go ahead and just read this and we can see if there's anything to discuss in it. And then you could read yours and we can move on. So this is a long poem written by William Wordsworth, who's my favorite poet. And he asks, who is the happy warrior? Who is he that every man in arms should wish to be? It is the generous spirit who, when brought among the tasks of real life, hath wrought upon the plan that pleased his boyish thought, whose high endeavors are an inward light that makes the path before him always bright, who, with a natural instinct to discern what knowledge can perform, is diligent to learn. And I think the thing that sticks out to me is this idea. I mean, there's specific traits, generous spirit, who brought among the tasks of your life has wrought upon the plan. He planned something. But I liked the pleased his boyish thought idea because I think as taking the male perspective, as young boys, we all do have like this vision of a hero, and oftentimes as we get older, it kind of dies. It often fades away with the again just muck of real life, the complexities, the sadness of real life, and we lose that flame that Ayn Rand talks about sometimes, the internal flame and the inward light, as he said here. And here the character of a happy warrior is someone who doesn't let that go. He's pleased by his boyish thought and he plans his life in that way. And that's one way to think about what it means to be a hero, right?
Certainly. And it calls back to the Psalm of Life, doesn't it? The young man talking to
Yeah.
the old man who's probably lost that brightness and has turned to God as like, it's almost like the last resort. So yeah, instead of doing that, keep your light bright.
Yeah.
Do
Well,
the things you plan to do. Make it
that's
happen.
yeah. That one's complicated because he was the psalmist was probably always a psalmist, I would imagine.
Oh,
I
I
like
never know though.
well, I mean at this I'm talking about that era. That would have been 1840s,
Oh
30s,
yeah, I
right?
guess they were kind of put into the church at like
Um,
12.
yeah, like I don't yeah, that was yeah. Anyway, but yeah, I agree with you 100%. So what about a legacy poem by Goethe?
Yeah, so this
What
one
about
I brought out the full two stanzas just so you can see the beauty of his poetry. Like just the skillful rhyme scheme is very rare to see. But I'm actually just going to read that little chunk in the middle there because I just think it's just perfect. Let reason be thy guide and make thee see. Then shall the distant past be present still. The future, ere it comes, thy vision fill. Each single moment touch eternity. Then at last shalt thou achieve thy quest, and in one final, firm conviction rest. What bears for thee true fruit is true. I just love the idea of like, yeah, you might reach for dreams, but if you're not using your mind to achieve them, they're not true fruit. It's not really what you wanted. It was just a dream or it was just the high apple.
well, and so this is a good like Goethe is a good example of a Enlightenment hero writer. Like he was writing in the Enlightenment. And so, like, again, this is to me why studying literature is so critical because he's going to have slightly different vision because of where he's coming from and the kind of culture and ethos of that era. So he's writing about people who want, like, Faust is the famous one, like
Mhm.
scholars and what they will do to get knowledge, which was a big question. Like, how much is enough knowledge of Earth, which was something that had never existed really in human history because all knowledge came from God, right? Everything we got was just
Mm.
right, say, but now we have this figure which was becoming popular, the naturalist. I mean, there's always naturalists, but I mean, the naturalist was becoming the scientist. So I don't think the scientist was really I mean, it might have been, I think it was coined in his lifetime, the term scientist, but it wasn't used until like late 1800s.
Shoot.
But, in terms of like scientist, by the way, just as a side note, was actually coined in analogy to artist, right? So scientist, artist, so there was,
Like a natural artist was a scientist kind of
well,
thing.
like it was just so artist. What is an artist? An artist could be a musician. He could be a painter, a poet, a fiction writer, a sculptor. Right? What do you
Mm.
call those people? They're artists. Well, you could have a physicist, a chemist, a
Oh,
mathematician.
I
What are they?
see.
They're
Okay.
scientists, right? So it was just that was the example. I think this was Newton's time when they started talking about this, something like that, which was actually around the same time as Goethe. Okay. Anyway, little side note that I think is
Love it.
interesting. But it's but the reason that's important is because like that becomes a hero and a
Yeah.
hero to satirize, to discuss, to emulate Mary Shelley's Dr. Frankenstein, Victor Frankenstein. He is that guy. Now that's kind of romanticism, going into romanticism, but it's the same kind of idea where you have this heroism, this idealizing of these particular traits. The man
Hmm.
who seeks for knowledge, right?
Hmm.
That's something that you don't, the Beowulf didn't like go out looking for, evidence for Grendel and what he was going to do.
No.
Like they don't have those kind of characteristics, which is why it's so important to look at these stories and investigate them because what it means to be a hero changes from era to era culturally. And then you
Certainly.
have to answer that question. And I think Goethe is a phenomenal person to study because he emulates so well the
Well, he
Renaissance.
was the scientist. He was a polymath. Like this guy was
Exactly.
brilliant.
Yeah, and that's a great example. Is he also as a person did that? Yeah, I don't know a lot about
That's
his
why
life.
his poetry is so potent. And actually, there's a couple, like, there's an artist here that was an astronaut as well coming up. It's like the people that were showcasing their own heroism in their art, they're the ones that I look up to.
Okay, so you like people who write about their own themselves as heroes, like
Well,
autobiographies type
write
thing.
about the things that they do to be a hero and then share that with the world. They're like, well, this is how I did it. Like Goethe, like he
Why
was
do you like that?
I like it because it's like it was possible for me. It is also possible for you. Here's my recipe. Here's my recipe to be a
I
hero.
see.
Use reason. It's like
Yeah,
that's
that's interesting. So there's not a lot of people who do that. Like I heard something recently from Leonard Peikoff. He was on YouTube recently and he was talking about someone asked him about writing an autobiography. And he said he doesn't want to do that really. He's not that interested. He doesn't think people will be that interested. He would be interested in someone writing a biography and of him, or not interested. He's okay with it, I think is the idea. And there's, it's one set of skill set. It's one skill set to be able to analyze your own success and what made you you. And that's pretty rare that even a great hero can do that. So you admire people who can do that, who can be successful, achieve something great, and analyze what they think they did that did that. I don't know if Edison wrote some little autobiographies about. I know Benjamin Franklin has the most famous one of those, or the first of those, the autobiography of Benjamin Franklin, which I recommend everyone reading. And you know, he embodies that American self-made man type thing because he literally talks about himself as making himself morally. He had a moral checklist and he would say, did I swear today? Or did I, snap at
oh.
somebody today or something like that? He had a whole, I don't remember he had a whole list of characteristics of what he wanted to be like. And he would every single night, say, okay, I snapped at my son. That's bad. So I have to get 20 days in a row or something like that in order to develop myself in this characteristic. He had this whole retinue of actions he needed to take, which I thought was always a great, thing to
Yeah.
do.
And you can take that to the things that you need to work on. Like you don't need to necessarily have a list of
Well,
30
that's what he was doing.
things. But
Yeah.
yeah, that's wow, that's actually
Yeah. It's like,
very, very introspective and important.
yeah. And I agree. So, and he thinks of himself as kind of making himself into a moral
Yeah.
person, which I like that whole idea, which is a modern idea because in the past it was, you were just born that way. Right. That
Hmm.
there wasn't the idea that you could and I think it's still the dominant view to some degree is a
It's in
kind
your
of,
genes.
yeah, exactly. Is exactly. Okay, so let's move and talk about. So we're talking about heroes. We have, these examples of heroes like Odysseus and Achilles and Goethe, Jeff Bezos. And what a hero does is they try to accomplish something, right? That's the whole idea. If you're not a hero, if you're just sitting on your butt watching TV, sorry. Although there was a movie that I did not see, I want to see, but it comes to mind all of a sudden called The Whale. And I want
Oh,
I want to know if that is like because all I saw is just
it
this
it's
Brendan
a
Fraser.
must watch. I think it's a
Okay.
must watch. Yeah, the relationship between father daughter, how you get to see it expand
Is
is
he a
very
hero?
important.
I haven't seen it. Is he a hero?
That is yet to be determined. I'd have to watch it more recently because I saw it maybe 3 years ago, or like I saw it when it just came out. So
Okay.
I guess it wasn't that long ago. But yeah,
Yeah.
as far as I can
Like two
tell, he
years.
was a very sad man, lost
Yeah.
his wife, I think it was, that kind of set him off. But in the time that he has, he works towards becoming a hero.
Okay. So that's a good thing. So he's still taking action. So if he would have not done that, if he would have just remained sitting on the couch eating whatever he was eating to make him that big or whatever happened, then that's not a good thing. But even if you're dealt bad hands or something happens to you, I have to mention this. If you have not seen the trailer for the documentary about Christopher Reeves, I really recommend it. I haven't seen the documentary. It just came out like a couple days ago, but it's Christopher Reeves who played the first, film adaptation of Superman. And
Yeah.
of course, he fell off a horse, becoming paralyzed from the from the neck down. And it seems like this really harrowing or inspiring story. I hope they don't like just spit on his image all the time or whatever, which we like to do today. But of a man who tried to embody this character of Superman, people looked up to him as like this is the hero, and then he couldn't walk, right? He couldn't move. He couldn't, you know, do anything except kind of talk a little bit, and yet he still tried to raise up, and he did a lot of work to help funding for the kind of situation he was in. And people today are walking now because of the research that's been done because of him. And that I think is a hero. And he has a quote about
Absolutely.
what he thinks a hero is, but I'll let you guys watch that. I don't want to spoil it. Anyway, I
The
think it's an
tease.
interesting, but he, what's that?
The
Yeah, yeah,
tease.
yeah. But when it thinks about like victory, like is breaking your spine and not being able to walk a victory, like is him just being able to move now a victory? What is victory? What does it look like?
Yeah.
That I think is an important question for the idea of a hero. What does a victory look like for Achilles and Odysseus? Odysseus wants to get home, right? Achilles just wants glory, and he ends
Mhm.
up getting it, but not in the way that he wanted it, right? What's a hero? What does victory look like for Harry Potter? Right? Harry Potter, the first whistleblower hero, really, in literature. That's basically what he is, right? He's a whistleblower hero. It's like, hey, there's this bad guy. He's in charge of everything. We shouldn't let him be. All right. So what do you
That's a
got
good
for?
way of putting it. Well, just really quickly, if you go back to that slide there,
Oh,
because there's
yes.
actually an unsung hero. So this is a retelling of the story of Icarus, right, who flew too close to the sun. Well, here is Brian Larson's image of him returning triumphant. So his father's wax wings actually were perfect, and he was able to fly to freedom. So I just love that kind of retelling of a myth where, yeah, we get one side of the story, or because it is a myth, we can give ourselves a better moral, which is actually using your brain can for you. So I just think it's stunning. It's
Yeah.
absolutely
It's a
stunning.
beautiful painting for sure. I would definitely have this one up in my house.
Larson's one of my favorites. You can, yeah.
Yeah. I've been to a house, I won't say who. I've been to a house where they have like Larson everywhere. And it's like, whoa, nice.
Oh,
Yeah.
tell me so I can make friends with them.
I'm sorry. If you meet them, maybe I'll like in person, I might point them out, but I don't want to call them out.
I'm teasing.
They probably don't want everyone to know. Okay. So yeah, this is a great painting. Go check out Brian Larson's stuff at Quint Cordair, Quent, where there he is. Or it's
He's
Cordair
here. He's a
Gallery.
hero too.
Yeah, he's a great writer as well. He's a poet. And Cordair Gallery is the gallery. You could buy a lot of great romantic realist paintings and sculptures there. And I've been to several houses where they just are surrounded. It's like a Cordair gallery. It's gorgeous.
Mhm.
So if you have the means to make your house a Cordair gallery, you definitely should. If you can't, try to get one painting at least. Okay. So you chose What Does Victory Look Like? You have Quentin Cordair. What do you got?
Yes. So I have A Man by Quent Cordero. It's nice and short. This is the whole poem. There is no defeat but the final defeat. Unconquered, I am while I live. I will be till I'm not, till I'm not. I will be what I will, unbroken, a man. It's just stunning. It's like thinking of what happened to Reeves. Like, yes, he had a horrible accident, but was he broken? Was he conquered? No, he lived up to that hero that he wanted to be, and he made a legacy for himself. And this just speaks to me so strongly because it doesn't matter what failure you reach, because you're going to reach failure if you're reaching for the stars. But so long as you live and you're doing what you will, you are being victorious. So I just absolutely love it.
Absolutely. I It makes me think of, or what you say in this here makes me think of the one time I met him a couple times, but a private dinner with John David Lewis, like 2010. I can't remember exactly when it was, a long time ago. I think I was still in college. And I don't know if you know who that is. He was an objectivist writer. He wrote a book called Nothing Less Than Victory. And I think
Hmm.
everybody needs to read that book. It's about victory in war and what it takes. And he compares basically victories that lead to more war and then a victory that there's never a war again between those two peoples, right? So the easy examples today is like Japan and Germany, right? There was continuous war with them before, like Germany. We had World War One, right? That still led to World War Two. But since World War Two, we're allies with them. So what was the difference? That's kind of what he looks at. He looks at the second Carthaginian War between Rome and they're called the Punic Wars. So he looks at that. He looks at the Civil War, right? Like why was there not a flare up after the end of the Civil War, things of that nature. So it's nothing less than victory. What does victory look like, and what does it take in war? Anyway, he was a great writer, expert in classical Greek, and he had, I think, throat cancer or something at the end of his life. He was pretty young. He was
Oh,
in his 50s when he got this. And I remember seeing him at a private dinner in Denver, Colorado, and he said, you know, to kind of talk about his illness and how he thinks about death now that he's, it's a there's a it was a high likelihood, but there was a chance he could survive, but there's a high likelihood he would probably not make it. And he ended up passing, but he said, I don't fear it, because I think of an Ayn Rand quote: those who live in the future, those who fight for the future live in it today. And that's kind of what this makes me think of. It's just like, it gives you a kind of eternity and eternal fighting when you can fight for the future, and it gives you an immortality now, in the sense, like that, in that sense. And I think that is kind of what I'm seeing here and what you're saying as well.
and not only immortality, but purpose. I think that's the thing that's missing from a lot of like immortal characters. Like I think of vampires, they're always purposeless, but this one is purposeful. He's doing what he will until his last breath. So I think that's like very important for a hero, is to actually have purpose. What are you here for? What's heroic about you is going to be very individual, but that's what your purpose is. That's what your goals are.
Yeah, absolutely. And that is another aspect of, I think, hero that you can see is, what are you fighting for? Why are you fighting? We think of heroes often in, like you were saying, in relation to war and fighting, and literal fighting. But Elon Musk is fighting a war in a sense, or not a war, he's fighting for his values. Jeff Bezos is doing that. And you could do that in every level. You don't have to be that, the richest person on the planet to fight for your values and live in it today and enjoy a great life. And you were mentioning engineers at the beginning, if that's who you admire, or writers who, I always admired, like, writers who were successful and made a really good living, but they weren't necessarily, oh my gosh, who wrote Harry Potter, the female,
Oh,
oh my
cool.
god,
Rowling, J.K. Rowling.
J.K. Rowling.
Yeah.
God, like, you don't have to necessarily be. There's a lot of Madeline Miller. Like, I don't think she's a billionaire. She's a successful writer, and that's a great person to emulate. I've always thought about, that's one of the reasons, one of my favorite founding fathers is Paul Revere, because he's a great man. He became a myth, but at the end of the day, he was an artisan. He was an entrepreneur. He made a great living, but he wasn't like the greatest writer of his era, Thomas Jefferson. He wasn't the greatest orator and lawyer of his era, John Adams, right? So he wasn't that, but he was still very pivotal. There is essential for him. He was probably, it's hard to say, but I would be willing to say that he was a big reason why we had the Revolutionary War, and we were successful at it in the
Mhm.
early stages, especially. Like, he was a big important part, and then he became a myth that was a big important part of the North, galvanizing the North, and moving forward to fight and
Well,
for
and it sounds like he would reach a different audience. Like each of the founding fathers would reach the men that they needed to reach, and that's what makes each of them a hero. Because you're not going to be a hero for everybody, but everyone that sees themselves in you is going to follow you. So I think that's
that's a good way of putting it. Yeah, like, I think he was more of a hero of the people,
Mhm.
right? Like, Jefferson is this very erudite, educated, high class, comes from money type
Hero of the
person.
intellectuals.
Yeah, and he, hero of the intellectuals and hero of the upper class. Whereas Paul Revere, he comes from more the middling class that's growing up in America, and becoming something unified and individual. And that's an
Mhm.
important thing, and he's still a hero. But Jefferson, speaking the way that he does, I mean, obviously the Declaration of Independence spoke to everybody, but I think maybe is going to have a little bit more of a challenge, where he's more like, I'll get a beer with you and let's fight this revolution. Like, he's like really helping people do that. And I think that's important. I think this poem, Invictus by Henley, I don't think I'm going to read this one. Um, but maybe the last two lines: I am the master of my fate. I am the captain of my soul. If you haven't read this poem, I really recommend it. But it's a good view of victory, in the sense of, even when you're struck down, even when you're at your lowest, when things are bad, Christopher Reeve's falling off his horse and breaking his neck and spine and never being able to walk again. This is his poem in a sense. And we all go through this. I don't think this is what you should only be thinking of because it's pretty dark, but we all in some various forms go through a period of negativity, destruction, bad things happening. And this is a valuable poem to remind us. So why don't you tell us about this painting that you chose?
I just love this because Alan Bean, he painted many images from the moon landing and he was an astronaut and he was a painter as well. So he actually shared his experiences straight from his work. And he has here, I've painted Pete Conrad and myself 239,000 miles from Earth during the Apollo 12 mission, standing on the ocean of storms, looking homeward. Like if that doesn't speak heroic, I don't know what does.
Yeah. So this was the question you asked of what kinds of heroes are celebrated, which we've kind of talked about already in the sense of, and I think astronaut is a good example of a hero to celebrate. And that is one that we have today. And that's the kind of explorer archetype, right? So one of the things I think is interesting about studying heroes is the archetypes. Like what are the broad, like, Christians love Jesus as an archetype. He's the archetype of of meekness and lamb-like behavior and slaughter, self-sacrifice, altruism, dying for other people, as that's
Yeah.
the ideal for them.
Yeah, I want to give him a little bit of credit because he did talk about like everything that I can do, you can do. So he was trying to let people know that like I'm not the only hero. Like I agree with you wholeheartedly. He is just the individual of self-sacrifice, but like he did say that everybody else like he's trying to evoke that kind of heroism in other people too. That's the only good thing I'll say. Got to give him a little credit.
Well, I mean, if I gave him credit, it would be, I read Richard Mitchell wrote a great stories, a linguist, about three great teachers of history: Socrates, Jesus, and the Chinese.
Confucius?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, as three like great heroes, and one of the great teachers, excuse me. And one of the things that Jesus did well was helping, even though I disagree with his philosophy and his religion,
100%.
but he was good at passing on that religion and getting other people to see it. So in a sense, he was a great teacher as a model of
Mm.
like, here's what a teacher could look like. And there is characteristics of the teacher in him and Socrates and Confucius that you can look at. The famous story of Jesus in this regard. And I think this is relevant to heroes because, again, if you want to be a teacher, what's the best teacher you could be? You want to look at the greatest teachers of all time. Those are your heroes, right? I think Leonard Peikoff is one of the great teachers of all
Yeah.
time, but and for a variety of reasons, the way he thinks, the way his humor, his structure of his stories, and what he focuses on. But Jesus, the story is that this is with the prostitute, right? When they're going to stone the prostitute,
Oh yeah.
and he goes around and he says, "He who has not sinned, cast the first stone." Now, that I think is a great teaching because what he's doing is, and what the story is great at Emil showing, and it's very short, but the idea is, look, if you believe in this philosophy of retribution and or like this evil thing, you have to live it internally. And if you do, then here you go. And it makes every individual person process internally their own morality. And everyone, of course, like clumps around everyone dropped the rocks because nobody individual. So it was a real, like, he was good at in that moment, especially getting to the individual and having them, have some kind of internal
Definitely.
awakening. And
Yeah.
that's what teaching is an internal awakening. You could disagree with the philosophy again, which I do, but he is good at having people do internal awakenings, individual internal awakenings, because he said, you, if you are the first, if you have had no sin, then you cast the first stone. Who is that person? And nobody would do it. And I think that's
Then Jesus just no, I'm joking. Joking.
He just clobbers her. Like, get this bitch out of here. Okay, so I think we should probably end here.
Yeah, this is a
I think
this
this
is a
is a
good spot.
good place to end. Again, we've
Um,
talked about this a bit, but what kinds of heroes are celebrated? So there's heroes, we can look at heroes of all ages, eras, ancient Greek heroes, romantic heroes. I like Yvain, Lancelot, the chivalric heroes. And they, in terms of, they're interesting to read. They're interesting, I think, in the impact they have today. So I think they still have a lot of resonance in the characteristics that we have and we admire today, right or wrong.
mhm.
But I think it's an interesting, perspective. What kinds of heroes are celebrated? Who are your heroes? Who do you think is interesting?
My
But
favorite heroes, yeah. I'm sorry, I
yeah,
thought you were actually asking
no,
me.
I am asking. Yeah,
Oh
yeah.
yeah. My heroes are all like scientists, engineers, technological progressives, like teachers, definitely. Yeah. The ones who further human knowledge, they're my heroes.
So yeah, people who further human knowledge. So you're definitely
Mhm.
an enlightenment person.
Yeah, yeah. Like
Yeah,
Ayn
you
Rand
like
is one of my personal heroes. I think I already said that though.
yeah. Yeah, so like someone who's focused not necessarily on defending conservative, like that's a conservative hero, someone who defend like Horatius in a sense is a conservative hero in a certain regard, right? Then outspake brave. So Horatius, let me just set it up. Like I don't know if you've read the whole poem before.
No.
Great poem, but it's about a man during a Roman invasion before the Republic, before the Empire. This is when it's a smaller fishing village, a little town or whatever. And they're going to be attacked by this horde of enemies, and they need someone to defend a bridge to stop this, but so that they can get all the people in the city, in the walls of Rome, and raise the portcullis or whatever. And so Horatius, people, the elders are like, who will do this? We need to do this, and no one wants to do it. And then Horatius says, then out, or someone, talking about him, the narrator says, then out spake brave Horatius, the captain of the gate, to every man upon this earth death cometh soon or late, and how can man die better than facing fearful odds for the ashes of his fathers and the temples of his gods? So that is a hero of conservative values, and not in a bad sense, but just in the sense of this is his home. He's trying to conserve it and save it from slot of an oncoming horde of enemies. And we need men like that. Those are the military heroes. Those are the heroes that I think the conservative right tends to want to preserve. And I don't think they're wrong to do that. I think they're wrong in other ways, but
Yeah.
because that's all they think is valuable. They don't also see the Elon Musks and
The
is
individuals that he just saved.
well, yeah, and what they're able to do and like the value of real progressivism in terms of furthering human knowledge. They're not as in tune to that and interested in that. They just want this like oh, this guy's a hero because he sacrificed, which is great, and not the sacrifice, but that he protects what he loves.
Well, and I'm glad you brought up sacrifice because to me, this isn't a sacrifice. This is him facing the actual odds. He's like, these are my highest values, and
Exactly.
this
Yeah.
is what I'm risking to save them. So, a sacrifice to me is like giving up those values for something lesser than or a disvalue to you, which he is not doing. He's saving
Yeah.
them.
Yeah, he's definitely not doing that. Yeah,
But
it's just like I think a real soldier today, like a who chooses what he fights for in America, for instance. He's fighting for that culture. Or like, in Israel fighting for, an existential or Ukraine, it's a kind of existential crisis. Like they're all gonna die and they're all being pushed into the sea. They have to fight for their existence. And there's a heroism for something like that.
absolutely.
Also, there's a book, The Right Stuff, you might like if you haven't read that. Thomas Wolfe. It's a nonfiction book, so you like real life heroes, but I think it fits into what you're interested in, particularly Cassie, and it's a story about the fighter, what are they called? The pilots before that led to the NASA program. The
Oh, wow.
I can't remember what the title is of the kind of pilot. It's like a test pilot. There we go. Test pilots, basically. And they're testing rockets and new things. And there's all like the stories about, or the book is about the kind of characteristics, like what is the right stuff, because the culture they had, the things they were doing was utterly insane in the sense of they were dying left and right, and that was what, but that was what you kind of had to do. You had, like, you were pushing the boundaries of human abilities and being the fastest man on the planet, literally. And so there's a heroism of it, and it's an interesting look at that culture and an admiration, an admirable way. Okay, so any last thoughts? So I don't know if I'm going to do this Shakespeare thing. I recommend people read Antony and Cleopatra, read Shakespeare. I would call him more of a Renaissance writer. Like, I think
Mhm.
Hamlet is a great example of a hero from Renaissance and like what the Renaissance values are. The kind of reflection on life and things of that nature. How do I think of this? Like internal struggle, destiny, morality, existential doubt, like those kinds of things in Hamlet, I think are representative of those kinds of ideals at that time. And you see this in
Absolutely.
Romeo and Juliet, you see this in Antony and Cleopatra of these big ideals, and there's like a little bit of doubt going on of like what's good about it. How do we proceed in the real world stuff happening? I think in the Renaissance as we're dealing with all this. And Antony, I like this passage for those of you who want to go read it, because to me it is a great illustration of admiration. And in this case, it's Cleopatra admiring the man she loves, Antony, and what she loves about him, and being able to voice that, being able to appreciate his heroism, despite the fact that she was kind of, the reason why he's dead now. But she loves him, and I think she really loves him. She loves him as a god among men. And I think it's, a really good look at what a hero is, and what kinds of heroes are celebrated. She celebrates that
Yeah,
heroism.
and it's a reminder to celebrate the heroes in your own life. Like maybe it is too far a stretch to see the heroes in the culture, but bring it home. If you're trying to be a hero, look at the people around you that really guide you. Because yeah, it can be your lover, it can be your family, it can be friends.
Well, hopefully your lover is your hero in a certain
I should
sense.
hope
At
so.
least in
Yeah.
some level, like maybe not an Elon Musk, because not everybody can be with Elon Musk, but your lover should be a hero, heroine. I just can't imagine, being in love with someone, but it's not that you don't have any
Completely
admiration for
right.
them at all. And I think a lot of people do that. I think they do it for, get married
Oh,
for
that's a
all
story for
kinds
another
of,
time.
yeah,
Thinking of love and
exactly.
romance.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
we could talk about contrasting views there.
Yeah. Okay. Any last thoughts, Cassie?
Thank you so much for this. Yeah, this conversation. It's been really cool to look at not only real life heroes and fictional heroes, but also just the concept of hero itself. I think that at least we've opened people up to a little bit of poetry that kind of showcases that, and hopefully
Hopefully.
they'll read on. Yeah.
Yeah. Hopefully we'll check it out. All right. Well, thank you so much. Make sure to check out Cassandra Dick's book, Songs from the Mountaintop, available anywhere you buy books, basically. And buy the paperback. Like, have the book actually. Do you have ebook as well?
Yeah, I'm not sure actually if they no, they do have the ebook, but I always recommend it's so eye-catching. You can have me on top of a mountain on your bookshelf.
Exactly. All right. All right. Well, thank you, Cassie, and until next time.
Thank you, Kirk.